The faded floral wallpaper in the hallway seemed to mock me, a relic of a happier time, a time before the cracks in our family foundation widened into an unbridgeable chasm. My childhood home, the place where I'd skinned my knees learning to ride a bike and celebrated countless birthdays, was now the battleground for a war I never wanted to fight. My half-sister, a woman I barely knew, was laying claim to the only tangible piece of our father left behind, and with it, a piece of my past. The front door creaked open, the familiar sound sending a shiver down my spine. I was 7, small and insignificant, as my father's towering figure filled the doorway. His suitcase stood sentinel beside him, a silent testament to his transient presence in our lives. He was a pilot, his life a whirlwind of far-off cities and time zones, a life that rarely included his daughter. My mother, her face etched with a weariness that spoke of long nights and unfulfilled promises, would force a smile, her voice brittle as she'd ask, "How long this time, David?" The answer was always the same, an elusive, "Not sure, love, duty calls." And with that, he'd be gone, leaving behind a void that echoed through the empty rooms of our house and the cavernous spaces of my young heart. Birthdays passed, marked by hastily scribbled postcards from exotic locales. School plays came and went, the empty chair a constant reminder of his absence. My childhood was a tapestry woven with the threads of longing and resentment, the bittersweet ache of a father who was always just out of reach. Years melted into decades, the sporadic postcards eventually ceasing altogether. Life went on. I graduated, built a career, found love. My father, relegated to the dusty corners of my memory, became a ghost, a shadow of a man who had failed to fulfill the role he was meant to play. Then, one ordinary Tuesday morning, a letter arrived, the return address unfamiliar yet strangely familiar. My heart thumped a chaotic rhythm against my ribs as I recognized the name scrawled across the top left corner. David Walker, my father. Reaching for the letter opener, my hand trembled, a maelstrom of emotion swirling within me. Curiosity warred with anger, a flicker of hope battling against years of resentment. As I unfolded the crisp paper, his words leaped out at me, each sentence a desperate plea for forgiveness, a belated attempt to bridge the chasm that separated us. He spoke of regret, of missed opportunities, of a longing to reconnect, to forge a relationship, however tenuous, in the twilight of his years. He was sick, he admitted, time slipping away like sand through his fingers. He yearned for a second chance, a chance to be the father he had never been. His words, though laced with remorse, felt hollow, a belated attempt at redemption for a lifetime of absence. The years of unanswered questions, the birthdays and graduations missed, the gaping hole in my life that he had left behind. Could a simple letter erase all of that? Could words, no matter how heartfelt, mend the fractured fragments of a childhood lost? The letter lay on the table, a tangible symbol of his plea, yet it felt like an insurmountable burden. To forgive, to reconnect, would mean reopening old wounds, confronting the pain of his abandonment. Could I bear to relive those years, to face the raw emotions that had been buried deep within me for so long? Days turned into weeks, the letter a constant presence, a silent accusation. My mind was a battlefield, the desire for reconciliation clashing with the bitterness of the past. The thought of seeing him again, of hearing his voice, filled me with a mixture of dread and a hesitant yearning. Could I, after all these years, bring myself to face the man who had cast such a long shadow over my life? My half-sister Claire was a stranger, a product of my father's second marriage, a marriage I had only learned about after his death. She was a living, breathing reminder of a life I had never known, a life where my father had seemingly found a semblance of happiness, a happiness that had eluded us. When the lawyer contacted me, informing me of my father's passing and the terms of his will, I was taken aback. The house, our childhood home, the repository of so many memories, was to be divided equally between Claire and me. It was a complication I hadn't anticipated, a twist of fate that brought this woman, this virtual stranger, into my life. Claire called me a few days later, her voice tentative, hesitant. She spoke of our father, of her childhood, of the man she had known, a man who seemed a world away from the distant figure I remembered. She spoke of his love for the house, of the countless hours he had spent tending the garden, of the laughter that had filled its rooms. It was a version of my father that I barely recognized, a version shrouded in a warmth and affection that I had never experienced. The house stood as a silent witness to our shared history, a physical manifestation of our fractured family. Each room held a memory, a whisper of a past that bound us together, yet set us apart. For Claire, it was a haven of happy memories, a place where she had felt loved and cherished. For me, it was a reminder of absence, of a father who was physically present but emotionally distant, a ghost that haunted the hallways of my childhood. We met at the house, two strangers brought together by circumstance and a shared inheritance. The air hung heavy with unspoken words, the weight of our past pressing down on us. We walked from room to room, our footsteps echoing in the silence, our eyes meeting and then darting away, each of us lost in our own thoughts, our own memories. The tension was palpable, a tangible entity that filled the space between us. We were two sides of the same coin, bound by blood but separated by experience. Our perceptions of our father, of the house itself, vastly different. Could we find a way to reconcile our pasts, to find common ground in the midst of our grief and our conflicting memories? The lawyer had suggested selling the house, dividing the proceeds equally. It seemed like the most logical solution, a clean break, a way to sever the ties that bound us to this complicated past. But as I stood in the garden, the scent of my father's roses filling the air, I felt a pang of resistance. This house, for all its painful memories, was a part of me. It held the echoes of my childhood, the laughter and tears, the moments of joy and sorrow that had shaped who I was. Could I bear to let it go, to relinquish this tangible link to my past, to the man who, despite his flaws, was my father? Claire, it seemed, felt the same. She spoke of wanting to preserve the house, of maintaining a connection to her father's memory. But how could we reconcile our differing needs, our conflicting emotions? Could this house, a symbol of our fractured past, become a bridge to a future we had never envisioned, a future where we might forge a bond, however tenuous, as sisters? The decision weighed heavily on me. The house, once a source of contention, had morphed into an unexpected dilemma. Selling it felt like a betrayal, a severing of the last remaining tie to my father, to my past. But keeping it meant confronting the ghosts that lingered within its walls, the echoes of a childhood marked by absence and longing. Claire and I talked hesitantly at first, then with growing openness. We shared stories, comparing our memories, our perceptions of the man who had been both father and stranger to us. We laughed, we cried. We found solace in the shared experience of grief and loss. As the days passed, the house seemed to shift, its weight lightening, its presence becoming less a burden and more a sanctuary. The air, once thick with tension, began to clear, replaced by a tentative sense of understanding, a fragile bridge built on shared memories and newfound empathy. In the end, the decision was less about the bricks and mortar and more about the intangible bonds of family, the complex tapestry of memory and emotion that connected us to this place. We chose to keep the house, to honor our father's legacy in our own way. It wouldn't be easy. The pain of the past wouldn't magically disappear. But as I stood beside Claire, watching the sun set over the garden, I felt a glimmer of hope. This house, once a symbol of our fractured family, had become an unexpected catalyst for healing, a place where we could come to terms with our past and perhaps even forge a future, together. The faded floral wallpaper in the hallway no longer mocked me. Instead, it served as a poignant reminder of the passage of time, of the enduring power of family, and the possibility of reconciliation, even in the face of loss and deeply buried resentment. The house, once a battleground, had become a sanctuary, a testament to the enduring strength of familial bonds.